On the morning of January 25, 1972, 22-year-old Vesna Vulović and her fellow cabin crew members assembled at Copenhagen Airport. They worked for the Serbian airline JAT, and they were scheduled to take over from another crew coming from Stockholm. Vesna was to fly on the leg from Copenhagen to Belgrade. She was also about to enter the Guinness Book of World Record for the highest freefall without a parachute, and surviving. Vesna had just joined JAT the year before, after speaking to a friend who had recommended the job. Vesna passed the interview easily enough, but the concerns about her medical examination due to her low blood pressure, which would have ruled her out. To combat this, Vesna downed coffee after coffee prior to the medical, in an effort to raise her blood pressure. It worked, and she passed. Little did she know that very same low blood pressure would probably save her life in the not-too-distant future. Vesna was thrilled to land a job with JAT because it was Yugoslavia's biggest airline and offered plenty of exciting opportunities. She loved the idea of being able to travel and shop around the world, and the January flight was her first time in Denmark. Because of a scheduling mistake, another Vesna was actually supposed to be flying that day, but whoever was allocating the shifts got the names mixed up, and so Vesna Vulović found herself waiting to board the plane for Zagreb, Croatia. As they were waiting for their plane to land in Copenhagen, Vesna noticed one of the passengers was in a slightly agitated state. He was pacing about, mumbling and frowning. Others noticed him too, but like Vesna, simply put it down to a fear of flying. At 3:15 in the afternoon, Flight 367 took off from Copenhagen and the 28 passengers settled into their seats. Vesna and the other flight attendants began dispensing drinks and snacks as the pilots navigated the plane towards Croatia to the southeast. As the flight moved over what is now the Czech Republic, disaster struck. Just 46 minutes into the flight, at an altitude of about 10,000 meters, there was a massive explosion in the plane's baggage compartment. It ripped through the plane's body, tearing it apart. The cabin depressurized and all of the 28 passengers and crew were flung from their seats and out of the plane, where they plummeted to their deaths. Vesna was also thrown from the plane. She too free fell 10,000 meters, but she survived. She was found laying by a local man, lying in the wreckage of the fuselage, moaning and crying for help, badly injured but alive. This incredible story has both fascinated and confounded air safety investigators, scientists, and basically anyone interested in miraculous stories of survival. How on earth did she survive? Vesna has no idea about exactly what happened because she passed out almost as soon as the plane depressurized, due to her low blood pressure. She only remembers greeting the passengers as they boarded and then waking up in the hospital with her parents by her bedside. To try and put the pieces together, we have to look at how and where she was found, and what happened to the plane when it exploded. The explosion occurred in the plane's baggage compartment in the lower section of the aircraft. This tore the plane's main body apart, throwing people into the sky. From here, there are a few possible factors that may explain how Vesna survived. She may have been preparing meals in the plane's kitchen at the time because she was found trapped in the wreckage by a dining car. The serving area of the plane was at the rear end. Air safety investigators surmised that Vesna was most likely preparing in the kitchen when the explosion occurred towards the middle of the plane. This meant that she would have avoided the greatest force of the explosion. With the holes being ripped into the fuselage, the main body of the plane, people and other items would have started swirling around wildly, being sucked out of the plane. A dining car may have then slammed into Vesna, pinning her into the plane. This would have no doubt lessened the impact when she hit the ground if she was partially protected by the steel structure of the plane. Added to this was where she landed. Vesna fell onto a snow-covered mountain in the Czech countryside covered with thick forest. The trees and heavy snow were also crucial in helping to break her fall. If she'd fallen directly onto a hard surface such as a road or bare mountain, it's unlikely she would have survived. Medical examiners also pointed to Vesna's low blood pressure as another major reason for her survival. When the plane depressurized with the explosion, her low blood pressure immediately caused her body to shut down and she passed out. Doctors say this was critical because her heart may have burst on impact if she had been conscious and had higher blood pressure. Vesna was discovered by a local villager, Bruno Honk. Like everyone else in the vicinity, he heard the deafening noise of the crash, and he made his way straight to the impact site. Honk was the first to arrive, and when he saw the horrific remnants of Flight 367, he naturally assumed that there weren't any survivors, until he heard a faint wailing, a crying from underneath the section of destroyed fuselage. Stunned to hear any voice, Honk raced to the wreckage to find Vesna lying somehow alive, pinned to the twisted metal by a service cart. And as luck would have it, Honk was a medic during World War II, and he was able to administer enough first aid to keep Vesna relatively stable until the emergency rescue services arrived. She was alive, but barely. Vesna had a fractured skull, broken ribs, fractured vertebrae and pelvis, and both legs were broken. She was taken to a Prague hospital and soon lapsed into a coma, which she remained in for the next 27 days. When she came to, she had amnesia and she was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down. All she could recall was greeting passengers in Copenhagen. When she learned of the disaster, she had to be tranquilized for shock. Meanwhile, authorities were trying to figure out who was responsible for the bombing. The most likely suspects were a group of Croatian nationalists who had been carrying out serious attacks on Yugoslavian civilians and military personnel. On the same day as Vesna's crash, a bomb went off in a train headed for Zagreb. The day after the Flight 367 explosion, a man called a Swedish newspaper, claiming responsibility for the attack. He identified himself as a Croatian nationalist, and investigators wondered if he or his associate was the man acting strangely at the Copenhagen airport prior to takeoff. The perpetrators were never caught, and the case remains a mystery, although the nationalist theory seems to be the most likely explanation. Vesna needed several operations to help improve her mobility. She was initially only able to move her left leg, but was eventually able to walk on both, albeit with a slight limp. Her spine was severely twisted, but other than that, she made a remarkable recovery. After surviving the fall, Vesna joined some illustrious company. A handful of others also plummeted from a similar height without a parachute and lived to tell the tale. These include Nicholas Alcemade, who was a British Air Force gunner in World War II. In 1944, his plane was attacked by German fighters and caught fire. Alcemade was faced with the terrible choice of either burning alive or jumping to his death. He chose the latter. He free fell more than 5,000 meters and he survived, just like Vesna. Alcemade's fall was broken by thick wood of trees and a cushion of snow. In 1971, just a year before Vesna's crash, Julianne Kopk was on a flight over Peru when her plane was hit by lightning and torn into pieces. She fell 3,000 meters into the Amazonian rainforest, still trapped to her seat. Like the others, Kopk amazingly survived the fall despite suffering serious injuries. But Vesna's fall topped them all, and she entered the Guinness Book for a 10-kilometer freefall. Because she was unable to remember anything about the crash, Vesna remained remarkably level-headed about the ordeal. When the time came for Vesna to fly home from Prague, doctors suggested giving her sleeping tranquilizers to aid the fear of flying again. But Vesna laughed them off. She said if she couldn't remember the crash, she had no reason to be scared. Vesna continued working for JAT, although the airline was nervous about passengers seeing her walking the aisle, so they transferred her to ground staff roles. Back in Yugoslavia, she quickly was thrust into the spotlight. She was embraced by the then-President Josip Tito, appeared on TV talk shows, and even had songs written about her. Despite the airline's reluctance to have her working with passengers, Vesna found that she was something of a good luck charm whenever she traveled. People who recognized her wanted to sit near or next to her, convinced they would be in for a safe flight if they did so. Although she did struggle with survivor guilt, Vesna acknowledged that the experience had overall made her an optimist. When asked for the reason for her unbelievable fortitude, she had a very simple answer: a lifelong diet of chocolate, fresh fish, and spinach.